There was a time when I was angry with my husband for not helping me with something I had never actually asked him to help me with. And at the time, I didn't see it that way. I thought he should just know. I had built a daycare business from the ground up. I didn't have experience running a daycare. I didn't have experience running a business. But somehow I went from figuring it out one day at a time to eventually having 5 facilities. And looking back now, I can tell you that I had taken on something bigger than I was prepared for at the time. I was overwhelmed. But Donna wasn't saying, "I'm overwhelmed." Donna was handling it. I would work, come home, cook dinner, take care of things around the house, run errands, remember appointments, and keep everything moving because in my mind, those were the things I had to do. But while my hands were doing all of those things, my mind was having a completely different conversation. Why doesn't he see this? Why doesn't he help? Why am I doing everything? Why do I have to tell a grown man what needs to be done? And resentment started growing. The interesting part is that Jake would say to me sometimes, "I don't understand you." And looking back now, I understand why he didn't understand me. I hadn't told him. I was expecting him to respond to a conversation that was taking place entirely inside my own head. Now, let me make something clear. I'm not saying husbands shouldn't notice their wives. I'm not saying a grown man has to be handed a chore list before he can contribute to his own household. That's not my point. My point is that I had taken responsibility for so much that I had created an expectation in my own mind. If my husband really sees me, he should know what I need without me having to say it. And when he didn't, I interpreted that. I attached meaning to it. And some of that meaning may not have been fair. My exhaustion was real. My need for help was real. But that didn't mean every conclusion I was drawing from those feelings was automatically true. And it took me years to understand the difference. My mother tried to teach me something during that season. She told me in so many words, "Donna, if you keep doing it, he's not going to do it. Leave it alone." That sounded simple. It was not simple for me. Because if I saw something that needed to be done, my instinct was to handle it. If something needed fixing, I'd figure it out. If something needed taken care of, Donna would take care of it. And eventually, I did start following some of my mother's advice. But it took me 6 months to a year before I really began taking my hands off certain things. And here's the part nobody tells you. When I stopped doing them, some things stayed undone. Not for a day, not for a week. Some things stayed undone much longer than I thought they should. And that drove me crazy because I had to make a decision. Was I actually putting this responsibility down, or was I only putting it down until I became uncomfortable enough to pick it back up? Those are two different things. Eventually, I made up my mind. If I take my hands off it, I have to leave my hands off it. If it doesn't get done when I think it should get done, I have to be okay with that. If it's done differently than I would do it, I have to be okay with that. And for things that aren't essential or dangerous, sometimes I even have to accept that it might not get done at all. That was hard for me. But here's something else I understand now. At the time, I mostly applied my mother's advice to things I considered men's responsibilities, repairs, things around the house that I thought the men should handle. I didn't realize I could put down other things too. I didn't have to be the only person running errands. I didn't have to keep track of every appointment. I didn't have to carry the entire mental load of the household. I didn't have to cook every meal simply because I had always cooked the meals. Some of those responsibilities could have been shared, but sharing responsibility requires something from both people. The other person has to be willing to participate, and the person who has always handled everything has to be willing to let go. And sometimes that second part is harder than we want to admit. So when a woman tells me today, I shouldn't have to tell my husband, he should just know, I understand exactly what she means. There was a time when I felt the same way, but now I would ask her a question. Do you instinctively know everything your husband needs without him telling you? Everything? Do you always know when something is bothering him? Do you always know exactly what would make his day easier? Do you always recognize when he's carrying something he hasn't told you about? If the answer is no, then why are we expecting him to do something we're not capable of doing ourselves? That doesn't mean we stop paying attention to each other. Actually, I think marriage requires us to pay attention. But there is a difference between being attentive and being a mind reader. I was giving Jake a test he didn't know he was taking. I wanted him to see my exhaustion. I wanted him to recognize what I needed. I wanted him to step in without me asking. And when he didn't, I became resentful. Today, I would handle that differently. I'd say what I need. I'd ask for help. I'd decide which responsibilities don't need to belong to me anymore. And once I put something down, I'd work very hard not to pick it back up simply because it wasn't being handled on my timetable. Now, there's another side to this. If you have clearly communicated that you're overwhelmed, if you've repeatedly asked for partnership, if you've explained what you need, and your spouse consistently refuses to participate, that's a different conversation. Communication doesn't guarantee cooperation, But before I decide somebody doesn't care about me, I want to make sure I haven't expected them to understand something I never actually said. That's one of the things marriage taught me. Sometimes resentment isn't only about what the other person isn't doing. Sometimes it's about everything we've silently decided we have to do. And sometimes the first step isn't getting everybody else to change. Sometimes the first step is asking ourselves, what have I taken responsibility for that I no longer need to carry? What do I actually need from my spouse? Have I told him? And if I put something down, am I willing to leave it down? I couldn't answer those questions very well when I was younger. I can answer them differently today. And that's why I share these things. Not because what worked in my house is automatically going to work in yours, but because maybe something I learned will help you look at what's happening in your own house a little differently. Find what works in your house and do that thing intentionally. Not my house, your house.